It was graduation season, and after 2 months of job hunting, I still hadn't landed anything. I dragged my weary body back to the flat I shared with my roommate. Verity Lovelace was lounging on the sofa, carelessly munching on crisps while scrolling through her phone. Seeing me return, she excitedly jumped up from the sofa and exclaimed, "Dulcie, you've gone viral." I was utterly confused and peered at her phone screen. She was watching a video where the content creator had stumbled upon an old newspaper with a missing person ad. The photo in the ad had caught their attention, so they'd taken a screenshot and posted it online. In just a few hours, the likes had already surpassed 500,000 and were still skyrocketing. What's that got to do with me? I thought. It wasn't my video, so whether it went viral or not wasn't my concern. Verity grew impatient. Look closely at the photo. I had been too focused on the caption earlier, but now I noticed the picture in the missing person ad. The black and white photograph had a vintage feel, slightly pixelated, but the woman in the tweed suit was undeniably elegant and beautiful. One glance was enough to make anyone's heart skip a beat. Is that me? I was shocked. In my mind, I had always been an utterly ordinary girl, lost in the crowd and unnoticed. Unlike the person in this photo, who sat there quietly yet instantly captured one's attention. I didn't remember taking any vintage-style photos like this, but the facial features were strikingly similar to mine. "It is you," Verity said excitedly, pointing at the text in the missing person ad. "Look, even the name's the same as yours, Dulcie Everly." I stared blankly at the few lines in the missing person ad. The gist of it was that someone had placed an ad claiming their wife had gone missing. Additionally, there was the name and phone number of the person who had placed the ad. Aubrey Chetwynd. I couldn't help but read the name aloud. For reasons I couldn't explain, a wave of inexplicable fear swept over me. After a brief moment of confusion, I felt angry. Who's behind this? A missing person ad from 23 years ago, before I was even born, with the same photo and name? I couldn't believe such a coincidence could exist. This had to be someone's cruel prank. People in the comments are already mentioning you, lots of them are asking for your photos to be posted, Verity suggested. Do you want to call and warn them off? I was already in a foul mood, and this incident only made it worse. I immediately dialed the landline number listed in the missing person ad. The other end picked up surprisingly quickly. The receiver was silent, with only a faint echo of wind rustling through roses. Suddenly, I felt a bit scared. Who are you? Why are you using my photo in a missing person ad to mess with me? Thinking of the ad's content, I angrily berated, "Who are you calling your wife, you unfortunate sod?" The receiver remained silent, but I could faintly hear breathing. After a long pause, a low, drawn-out voice said, "Dulcie Everly, you've finally found me." That night, I kept replaying the voice in my head, obsessively dreaming. In the dream, the old house had a high, round dome, and white lilies dripping with dew bloomed on a flower stand in the corner of the hall. Near the flower stand, a man sat in the darkness with a cigarette, next to an old-fashioned white telephone, lonely as snow. The next day when I woke up, I felt a bit groggy. I mustered up the energy to attend an interview, and in the afternoon, I dragged Verity straight to the city library. I don't know what was going through my mind, but I really started looking through old newspapers from 23 years ago. Verity laughed at me. "You don't actually believe it's real, do you?" I didn't know how to explain it to her. At first, I didn't believe it either, but that dream was too bizarre. After what seemed like ages, as the sky gradually darkened, Verity couldn't take it anymore and found a spot to lie down and sleep. Just when I was about to give up, I suddenly saw a familiar photo in a 1999 newspaper. I stared in disbelief at the largest section of the publication, a missing person ad, my mind going blank. Could it really be a coincidence that decades ago, there was a woman who looked exactly like me and had the same name? I took the newspaper, intending to wake Verity, but as soon as I took a step, everything started spinning. After a brief moment of turbulence, my vision gradually cleared. To my horror, I realized that the rows of bookshelves had vanished, and I was clearly no longer in the library I had been in. The unfamiliar vintage living room was spacious, with a soft, melodious piano tune drifting through the air. I stiffly turned my head towards the source of the music, unable to look away. By the window, at the piano, sat a slender young man in very formal old-fashioned attire. His long, pale fingers, beautiful as works of art, danced across the black and white keys. Moonlight gently bathed him, making him more enchanting than the moonlight itself. It was because of this that I had never seen anyone quite like him before, quiet, cool, and elegant, beautiful as if he were not of this world. The music stopped abruptly as the man noticed the presence of his uninvited guest. He merely glanced over calmly, the moonlight slanting into his eyes, clear and cool as still water. Unalarmed by my sudden intrusion, he asked with the faintest curve of his lips, "How did you get in?" Only then did I realize how awkward the situation was. How could I explain? Even if I said I was reading in the library and suddenly appeared here, he'd probably think I was mad. What if he thought I was a thief? If he called the police, I wouldn't be able to explain myself no matter how hard I tried. Anxious and flustered, my mind not working properly, I blurted out, "What if I told you I fell from the sky like Elizabeth Bennet? Would you believe me?" The man stared at me silently, not returning my smile in the slightest. My unease grew, but he spoke softly, "Take whatever you like. Just close the door when you leave." I awkwardly tried to explain, "I'm really not a thief." His gaze fixed on the window. "The door is opposite you." I breathed an internal sigh of relief. His tolerance was beyond imagination. I quietly began to move towards the exit, but as I turned, I noticed something odd. On the bagpipes stand in front of the man was a clear glass containing cold water, next to a brown pill bottle. Suddenly, a thought flashed through my mind. Who plays bagpipes in their own home in the middle of the night, still dressed formally? And what kind of person isn't afraid of an unexpected visitor, even inviting them to take things? This didn't seem like normal behavior. So what were those pills? Sleeping tablets or some kind of deadly poison? As if possessed, I blurted out, "Sir, what time is it?" He calmly pointed towards the wall clock. It was too far away for him to see clearly, so I walked over myself. Before I could make out the time, the calendar beside it left me stunned. The latest page boldly displayed April 30th, 1993. Shocked, I pointed at the calendar and asked, "Is this from a restaurant?" Who on earth would have a 90s calendar at home unless it was from a restaurant? The man looked up, his expression softening slightly. With a look that said, "Caught you, thief," he spoke clearly, "That's not worth anything. Take the vase on the left." I had no time to explain I didn't want to take anything. Nervously, I asked, "What year is it?" He gave me an odd look, "Can't you read?" My mind reeled. Had I traveled back to 1993? I suddenly realized I was still clutching the old newspaper from 1999. Hurriedly, I opened it again to look at the missing person ad. An unbelievable thought formed in my mind. Cautiously, I asked him, "May I ask your name?" The seconds of silence that followed were agonizing. Thankfully, he finally spoke. His cool voice brushed my heart like snowflakes, "Aubrey Chetwynd." Aubrey Chetwynd. The missing person notice from 1999 perfectly matched the man before me. I was a bit dazed. Before my unexpected time travel, I couldn't believe the photo in the notice was me. But now, I had no choice but to believe it. According to the information in the missing person notice, he would become my husband. I gazed at the man with his clear, chiseled features in the moonlight, my heart racing inappropriately. Sensing my gaze, Aubrey looked up. "Anything else?" Aubrey frowned imperceptibly at my strange behavior. I quickly covered my smile and twisted my fingers pitifully. "Sir, I have nowhere to go." This was my future husband, after all. What if he died if I left now? The best solution, of course, was to stay. Before he could refuse, I burst into tears again, pleading softly, "Could you let me stay for one night? My name is Dulcie Everly, I'm definitely not a bad person." I held up 2 fingers, "I swear." My eyes blinked pitifully as I searched his face, filled with tears threatening to fall. I thought to myself, I truly am a genius at acting. Aubrey stared at me for a long time, as quiet and cold as frost and snow. I felt uncertain, as it was only natural to be wary of a stranger. He didn't speak, so I could only wait. The surroundings were quiet, with moonlight gently draped over his shoulders, half of him bathed in moonlight, half shrouded in melancholy. After a long pause, he said softly, "There are many rooms in the house. Stay in whichever one you like." Thank you. I burst into tears instantly. How fortunate that Aubrey was a soft-hearted person. The reason he suddenly hesitated was probably because he had originally planned to reach his life's end tonight, and my intrusion had disrupted his plans. I turned away, feeling an indescribable ache in my heart. After wandering around the house, I randomly chose a room and sat down. Not long after, I heard faint footsteps going upstairs in the hall as Aubrey returned to his own room. The country house at night was sparsely lit and eerily quiet. I felt uneasy, with the anxiety of being in a different time and space, as well as worry for Aubrey. Tomorrow when I wake up, I might see his corpse. Well, since he's my person, I have to protect him. I thought righteously. I hugged my knees on the floor and crept to Aubrey's door. A knocking sound echoed through the empty house, followed by silence from within. A bad feeling washed over me, and I forcefully pushed open the door. Before I could see clearly inside the room, the bathroom door on the left opened at that moment. Cool mist rushed out, and a man wrapped in a loose bathrobe emerged. With only the bathroom light on, he stood with his back to the light. Water dripped from his wet hair, rolling from his brow to his jaw and down his half-exposed chest. I stared for a moment, my mind wandering uncontrollably. The water on his body must be cool, but his chest must be burning hot, right? It's all Verity Lovelace's fault, that cheeky girl. She's always sharing her secret stash with me. Gradually, my mind has been filled with naughty thoughts. I feel so ashamed I want to slap myself, but Aubrey Chetwynd remains calm, nonchalantly clutching his dressing gown tight. Is there something you need? His voice sounds a bit husky, tinged with the dampness in the air. Oh my, his kindness only makes me feel more guilty. But since I'm already here, I can't give up halfway. I employ my usual trick, putting on a pitiful and fragile act, timidly whispering, I'm a bit scared. Aubrey raises an eyebrow, not understanding. Indeed, how could a girl in her early 20s be afraid to sleep alone at night? Not only does he not understand, I don't quite get it myself. To cover up this flimsy excuse, I try my best to appear timid and frightened. I've just arrived here, and I'm not familiar with the place. Plus, this house is so posh, I feel like there might be something. I anxiously glance around the room, my hesitation perfectly portrayed through my actions. Aubrey is speechless again. I feel he's already been more than accommodating, so I quickly purse my lips as if about to cry, and say in a barely audible voice, "Can't I stay in your room?" Aubrey gives me a cool look, barely holding it together. Don't get the wrong idea, I just want to sleep on the floor in your room. I say, forcing out a couple of tears and looking at him pitifully. I sleep very quietly, I won't disturb you at all. Once again, Aubrey yields to my tears. He silently folds up and takes out a bundle of bedding from the wardrobe, laying it out on the floor beside the bed. I'm secretly delighted but maintain my weak and helpless demeanor as I place my pillow on the makeshift bed. Gratefully, I say, thank you. Aubrey, expressionless, says, go sleep on the bed. I stare wide-eyed as he puts my pillow on the bed and places his own on the floor bedding. At this moment, I suddenly feel a bit emotional. It seems I'm lucky enough to have met someone like him. On this midsummer night, the window is wide open, moonlight bleaching the light curtains, stirring gentle ripples. I'm in a daze, thinking it's a bit hot, my drowsiness light. I ask softly, do you have an electric fan? It's strange, living in this fancy Victorian house from the 1890s, not only is there no air conditioning, but not even an electric fan. No, he replies. Aren't you hot? Aubrey's voice is soft, a calm mind is naturally cool. Well, aren't you just perfect? Disturbed by the heat for half the night, I hadn't slept well at all. My long-established body clock still woke me up early, much to my annoyance. Opening my eyes to the sparsely furnished room, I slowly remembered that I was in 1993. Instinctively, I listened for Aubrey Chetwynd. The makeshift bed beside mine had already been cleared away, and Aubrey was nowhere to be seen. I suddenly became fully alert. Surely he hadn't left while I was asleep. At this thought, I sprang out of bed, forgetting even to put on my slippers as I rushed out of the room to look for him. After searching all 3 floors of the house, I still couldn't find any trace of Aubrey. Standing in the empty theater, my mind was in chaos. Having inexplicably traveled to 1993, Aubrey felt like the only lifeline I could cling to. If he was gone, what would I do? Besides, a person like him shouldn't meet such an end. As I pondered this, my eyes began to sting. I wasn't sure if I was upset for myself or for him. The door creaked open, and Aubrey entered carrying a bag. Seeing me standing there barefoot with reddened eyes, he paused momentarily. The weight lifted from my chest, and I awkwardly turned my head to avoid his gaze. I saw the medicine last night, I said, pointing towards the bagpipes. I thought you might have. The glass and medicine bottle that had been on the bagpipes stand were gone, which had led me to jump to conclusions. Aubrey stood in the doorway, his gaze distant as if obscured by a layer of mist, silent and still. After a long moment, he changed his grip on the bag and held it up. Went downstairs to buy breakfast. With that, he beckoned me to sit at the dining table. Embarrassed by my misunderstanding, I kept my head down as I sipped my porridge, not daring to look at him. A beautiful hand came into view, the skin pale and cool, with blue veins clearly visible. He pushed a stack of banknotes towards me. Take this money and go home. It seemed he had taken me for a desperate vagrant who had sneaked into his home to steal, having no other choice. And to be fair, most people would assume I was a thief. But it was rare to find someone who could be so kind to a thief. I couldn't explain to him where I had come from, so my mind raced, thinking perhaps I should just play the sympathy card all the way. Sir, I have no home, I said, keeping my head down over my porridge as tears began to fall, half truth and half lie. My parents died when I was young, and my grandmother who raised me passed away 2 years ago. I'm homeless, that's why I came here. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Aubrey's fingers curl on the table's surface. I put even more effort into my performance. Couldn't you rent me a room? Once I find work, I'll pay you back the rent. That's not very convenient, Aubrey said coldly. My act had failed, I felt utterly defeated. There was nothing for it. If he wouldn't take me in, I could hardly stay here uninvited. After breakfast, I left with my pride intact, not taking the money he had offered. I planned to find work nearby and settle in for the time being. But I had forgotten one crucial problem. In 1993, I hadn't even been born yet. I was, quite literally, an undocumented person here. Finding legitimate work was out of the question. After wandering the streets all day, without a penny to my name, hot and hungry, I was half dead. I couldn't understand it. Why did other people get to enjoy the high life, punching arrogant young ladies and kicking scheming villains, surrounded by handsome men, while I was left to starve on the streets? I felt awful, miserable. By nightfall, my pride had been starved out of me, and I could only slink back to knock on Aubrey's door. As soon as the door opened, I threw away what little dignity I had left and hugged him tightly. Sobbing, I said, Aubrey, I came here because of you. If you don't want me, I won't survive. Aubrey's body stiffened, falling into an eerie silence. My heartfelt plea was suddenly interrupted by the sound of several men trying to stifle their laughter from the neighboring flat. Someone clapped Aubrey on the shoulder, chuckling, "Well done, Aubrey, you've got a girl so smitten she's come to your door ready to die for you." Seeing the group of men and women gathered inside the doorway, I was utterly mortified. Fortunately, those men were quite understanding and polite. After a brief jest, they returned to the main hall, leaving the space to Aubrey and me. I belatedly let go of him, wiping away my tears. With a lack of confidence, I explained, "Truly, I didn't know you had guests." Aubrey looked down at me, pausing for a moment. Then he stepped aside slightly. "Come in, then." To my surprise, he didn't send me away. I was so moved I nearly burst into tears again. I'd never admit it, but I was actually on the verge of crying from hunger. Perhaps it was my anxious demeanor that made me appear docile and meek in others' eyes, as the men in the hall began to exchange subtle, knowing smiles. Feeling somewhat embarrassed, I noticed the scones on the coffee table and the food on the dining table that hadn't been touched yet. "Is it your birthday today?" I turned to look at Aubrey. At that moment, I suddenly remembered the water and medicine on the piano stand yesterday. Something pierced my heart, making me feel awful. How despondent must one be to choose to end their life on the eve of their birthday? Aubrey didn't answer, simply saying, "Sit." There was only one empty seat at the table, which should have been Aubrey's place. As I was about to pull out a chair, a burly-looking man next to the empty seat stood up. Love, come sit here. The man was quite muscular, with a thick gold chain around his neck, exuding the air of a gangster boss from the movies. He smiled at me kindly, but I still felt a bit uneasy. Before I could refuse, he had already brought over another chair. Everyone at the table moved closer together to make room for him to squeeze in. "Thank you," I said softly, sitting down next to Aubrey. As soon as I was seated, the man with the gold chain rubbed his hands together and asked warmly, "So, love, tell us, how long have you been with our Aubrey?" He smiled so amiably, but the brown scar on his face made him look like a tough character. I shifted nervously closer to Aubrey and said, "We've just met." "That can't be right," he said, stroking his chin with a look of disbelief. Another man chimed in, "Come on, Barnaby, leave it be. The young lady's shy, don't frighten her." The man called Barnaby nodded repeatedly at this, "Right, right, right." He then picked up his chopsticks and put a large piece of roast chicken on my plate. "Forgive me for being forward, love. Here, have some chicken." Looking at his delighted expression, I had a strange sense of déjà vu. Yes, it was just like in those TV dramas when a son brings his girlfriend home, and the way the mother looks at her future daughter-in-law. I was amused by this absurd thought and couldn't help but glance at Aubrey. If he knew what I was thinking, he'd probably throw me out immediately. Catching my gaze, Aubrey looked away indifferently. He spoke coldly, "Leave as soon as you've finished eating." I thought he was talking to me and felt a chill in my heart. It seemed I was destined to spend the night on the streets after all. I bowed my head and quietly nibbled on the roast chicken in my bowl. I was famished, but with so many people around, I felt too self-conscious to eat properly. The men's laughter and chatter filled my ears. They had stopped deliberately drawing me into the conversation and were now discussing everything under the sun. Dinner lasted for over an hour. Barnaby Ainsworth was the first to stand up. "Well, lads, I think we're all done here. We'll leave you to cut the scones. Time for us to make tracks." The others quickly followed suit. One of them lazily quipped, "Aubrey, mate, in previous years it was just us blokes keeping you company on your birthday. Bit dull, like a bunch of monks. Looks like you're off the hook this time." Aubrey Chetwynd deliberately wiped his fingers as he replied, feeling hard done by, "Are we?" The man immediately sobered up and said seriously, "Not at all, I'm just chuffed for you." He glanced at me and added warmly, "You've got someone to keep you company now." "Not necessary," Aubrey said, his eyes downcast. The lamplight cast shadows across his brow, making his eyes look dark and brooding. I suddenly felt very uncomfortable, wondering if I should explain things further to his friends. Suddenly, someone grabbed my hand and pressed a gold chain into my palm. Barnaby announced grandly, "Listen, love, I didn't know what was going on when I came, so I didn't bring a gift. This chain is for you, consider it a welcome present from me." I was stunned. "This must be worth a small fortune." "I can't accept this," I stammered, trying to give it back to him. He glared at me fiercely. Not taking it would be like slapping me in the face. Frightened by his manner, I looked to Aubrey for help, trembling slightly. Aubrey's lips curved into a slight smile on my behalf. "We'll sell it tomorrow and split it 50-50. The crystal chandelier sparkled overhead as the handsome man spoke with easy charm, a faint smile playing on his lips. I found myself captivated, unable to look away. The others had all left, leaving the room in silence. Aubrey leaned back slightly, his tone playful as he asked, "Why are you staring at me like that?" I turned away, embarrassed, as he added lightly, "Not happy with a 50-50 split?" Realizing he was teasing me, I felt even more mortified. I placed the gold chain in front of him and said, "You should return this to your friend another day." Remembering what he'd said before dinner, I stood up, taking the hint. "Thank you for dinner. I'll be going now." Aubrey's amusement was evident as he made no move to stop me, but asked, "You said earlier you came because of me. What did you mean by that?" I hadn't expected him to follow up on that and wasn't sure how to respond. The reason I'd said that was because I suspected I'd traveled here due to something like a missing person notice. But I couldn't possibly explain that to him. It was too absurd. Seeing my hesitation, Aubrey turned to look out the window. "Sit down and have something to eat." I was surprised that he'd noticed I'd barely touched my food. After a moment of silence, Aubrey picked up the gold chain and toyed with it. This can cover your rent. Fair enough? Was he asking me to stay? My face lit up and I nodded enthusiastically. More than fair. You're so kind, sir. Aubrey pressed his lips together to suppress a smile. Then eat. Relieved that I wouldn't have to sleep on the streets, I sat down and began to eat in earnest. When I finished, I rolled up my sleeves and took it upon myself to clean up. Aubrey reached out to help, but I panicked. Don't. I can manage. Living in someone else's home and eating their food, I had to make myself useful if I didn't want to be thrown out. Much obliged, Aubrey said with amusement, letting me get on with it. I bustled about, putting everything in order until the kitchen was spotless. Satisfied, I dusted off my hands. Turning around, I saw Aubrey sitting on the sofa through the glass kitchen door, gazing pensively at the strawberries. Noticing me watching him, he asked casually, "Would you like some scones?" I rushed over excitedly and began lighting the candles. The scones don't matter. What's important is celebrating your birthday with you. Aubrey looked at me silently for a moment, then nodded. All right. I ran to turn off the lights and urged him, "Come on, make a wish." Aubrey stared at his lips uncomfortably. I don't have any wishes. Seeing that he probably hadn't made birthday wishes before, I realized that as a grown man, he might find it a bit awkward. I lied convincingly, "Just try it. It really works." Aubrey looked at me quizzically as I gazed back at him with wide, earnest eyes. After an internal struggle, he gave in and quietly closed his eyes. For those few brief seconds, he was enveloped in darkness, the flickering candlelight gently illuminating his features, unknowingly enchanting. After moving in with Aubrey Chetwynd, I didn't sit idle. Without proper identification at the time, I found a temporary job at a small restaurant nearby. It was exhausting work, but fortunately, the owner didn't strictly require identity verification. Aubrey was an odd fellow. He rarely left home, spending most of his time in the study, making for very quiet days. The house phone, however, rang incessantly every day. Aubrey always answered, speaking little, and typically hanging up within a minute. I didn't know who was calling, nor did I ask. Though we lived under the same roof, Aubrey remained an enigma. I knew nothing of his work, his family, or his past. At 7 o'clock each morning, the doorbell would ring punctually. A young girl would leave a basket of groceries at the door, take away yesterday's rubbish, and leave. Aubrey only saw her at the end of the month to settle the bill. They seemed both familiar and distant. Aubrey maintained a brief connection with everyone. His culinary skills were exceptional. When it came to cooking, he had abundant patience and focus. Every dish on the table was neatly arranged, colorful, and as exquisite as a work of art. I was astounded when I first saw it. I joked, "You're not secretly a chef, are you?" Aubrey denied it, "I've just had a lot of time to practice." I tried to understand. In his sparse yet tranquil life, he sought things to pass the time, striving to sustain the length of his existence. We lived in a habitual yet tacit understanding. In the mornings, he'd invite me to join him for breakfast, and in the evenings, he'd wait for me for dinner. Occasionally, when the mood struck him, he'd watch a bit of telly with me, exchanging a few casual words about trivial matters. When I had free time, I might curl up in his study, idly flipping through the books on his enormous bookshelf. Aubrey was incredibly tolerant, allowing me to handle his expensive collection. Perhaps he was indeed quite bored. Just as I was secretly calculating the worth of his book collection, he was intently working on that gold chain beside me. Through sheer persistence, he had taught himself a technique to not only melt down the tacky gold chain but also to contemplate crafting it into new designs. I wasn't particularly impressed by his hobby, just thinking he had too much time on his hands. I teased him, "Are you preparing to make your grand entrance into the gold market?" Still learning, Aubrey smiled modestly. "But I could give it a try if the opportunity arises. You'd be better off investing in property." Aubrey's gaze fell on my face as we chatted. "Are you interested?" "Of course." "You have no idea how terrifying property prices will become in the future." Thinking about the rapidly inflating property prices in the future, which were still dirt cheap now, yet I still couldn't afford them. Others who time traveled would change their fate and reach life's peak, but even after time traveling, I remained utterly skint. Aubrey's lips curved slightly as he pulled open the drawer in front of him, took out a bankbook, and pushed it towards me. If you like, go ahead and buy. I paused momentarily, silently gazing at him. It wasn't because of him, but I heard in his tone that I was spoiled and indulged. Aubrey Chetwynd also noticed the imperfection and humorously curled his lips. It's an investment. When we make money in the future, we'll still split it 50-50. I remained silent, looking down and realizing he didn't actually have much interest in making money. Not good? His long fingers rested on the table as he seriously considered. Then 30-70, I take 30 and you take 70. You're so generous. I was genuinely amused by him. I'm a gentleman, he said. Hearing his matter-of-fact tone implying men should take the short end of the stick, I couldn't help but ask, are you this generous with everyone? Aubrey's eyes flickered slightly. Not entirely. My raised heart suddenly settled, and I grew bolder. Just as I was about to open my mouth to probe how I was different to him, Aubrey cut me off first. It's late. His voice was perfectly cool. I immediately understood his polite rejection, and the question on my lips turned into a good night. Aubrey sat silently with his head lowered in the lamplight, wordless. I felt a wave of frustration, knowing I shouldn't have those messy thoughts. Such a man, facing each other daily, it's hard not to let one's imagination wander. But I should know better than to cross the line. For Aubrey, I should be a comfortable companion in his lonely life. Once I step over the line and break this balance, he would be very troubled. Moreover, I don't even know if I might suddenly return to 2022 at some unknown time. The future and that missing person notice made me fearful and retreat. Days repeated themselves. One morning as I was leaving, I met the young girl who delivers vegetables. Over time, we had gradually become familiar. We walked together, and the girl knew I was Aubrey's tenant, which made her slightly curious. She said, Mr. Chetwynd is such a wealthy man, yet he actually rents out his house. I chatted with her casually, is he very rich? Isn't he? She kicked at the twigs on the ground, gossiping with me in detail. His family used to be very famous. His father was a tycoon, and his mother was the daughter of an aristocratic family. I've seen them before, they were such a perfect match and very much in love. I imagined such a scene, thinking it must have been quite enviable. Mr. Chetwynd is also very talented. I used to always run to the corner shop to watch telly, and I often saw him on it. People praised him as a genius bagpiper, saying he won many big awards, even international ones. I only then learned that Aubrey was a bagpiper. Suddenly, I remembered that except for the first day when I arrived and saw Aubrey play the bagpipes, he hadn't touched them since. This shouldn't be a bagpiper's attitude towards his instrument. I tentatively asked, why did he stop playing the bagpipes later? The young girl sighed, something happened to him 3 years ago. She hesitated, only saying, it's hard to explain in a few words. I only saw it in the news, don't know if it's true or not. I kept this in mind all day, and after work, I specifically went to the city library to look for newspapers from 3 years ago. I actually found news reports about Aubrey Chetwynd, and they were quite eye-catching. I carefully read through all the news related to him from nearly 3 months, piecing together the complete story from between the lines. Yet, I felt a sense of suffocation. Even Aubrey Chetwynd, now silent as still water, was once young and reckless. The young prince, a brilliant bagpiper with a radiant aura, coupled with his good breeding and alluring looks, possessed an unrivaled confidence that bordered on arrogance. He had his own principles and couldn't tolerate even a speck of sand in his eye. Offending people was inevitable. What Aubrey hadn't anticipated was that his enemies, harboring grudges for years, would be so determined to destroy him. The day of the incident was quite ordinary. On the evening of a concert at the Assembly Rooms, he left the stage after receiving thunderous applause. About 15 minutes later, the staff suddenly heard a girl's piercing cry for help from backstage. Everyone rushed in, witnessing Aubrey pinning a girl down on the sofa, her clothes torn to shreds. They saw with their own eyes the girl desperately fighting back, clawing at Aubrey's shirt front, leaving long, bloody scratches on his face. In everyone's eyes, the fact that Aubrey had assaulted the girl was set in stone. The news of Aubrey being taken away by the police from the Assembly Rooms spread rapidly through the streets. Overnight, he went from being a brilliant bagpiper basking in glory to a despised outcast. Falling from grace, Aubrey hit rock bottom. Even more devastating was that his father, upon hearing the news of his son's trouble, suffered a heart attack and passed away without uttering a word, his eyes unseeing. His poor mother, with her son in prison and her husband deceased, had no time even for grief. She shuttled between arranging the funeral and visiting her son in prison. Depleting their savings and with support from Aubrey's friends, after several months, things finally took a turn. The girl who had accused Aubrey, learning of the fatal consequences, revealed the truth under public pressure. It was all her own fabrication, as someone had paid her a hefty sum to ruin Aubrey's future. She said, "I only told a lie. I never thought things would turn out like this." Ironically, those who had framed Aubrey were only briefly detained for a few months, showing good attitudes in admitting their mistakes. But Aubrey's life was beyond salvation. People, self-righteous in their perceived justice, didn't believe this so-called truth. They questioned whether the Chetwynd family had used money to exonerate Aubrey, and the accusations and insults never ceased. What destroyed him went far beyond this. His mother, after he was released, finally let her guard down. The tightly wound spring in her heart uncoiled, and she fell gravely ill. Within 2 short months, she passed away. A ruined life, parents who died because of him, countless knives cruelly carved a massive void in Aubrey's heart. I had been in the city library for a long time, only coming to my senses when it closed. Standing on the street, I looked up at the sky. The moon, suspended high in the heavens, mercifully cast its clear light upon all things on earth, determined to make even the night clear and beautiful. How compassionate the moonlight was, yet it couldn't penetrate Aubrey's world. In his dark, long night, he couldn't wait for daybreak. I walked with a heavy heart, lost in thought. Suddenly, I looked up and saw Aubrey Chetwynd standing alone in the night beneath the oak trees lining the street. He was waiting at the entrance, watching me approach from afar. My heart pounded like waves crashing against the shore, the ripples lingering long after. It was an unmistakable flutter, a genuine ache in my chest. I could only whisper, "Were you waiting for me?" In the darkness, Aubrey's brow furrowed slightly. "You've never been out this late before." I was worried. He paused, then explained, "I wanted to check on you, but then I realized I don't know where you work." I had simply told him earlier that I'd found a job, without specifying what it was. He wasn't one for small talk, so he hadn't inquired further. My emotions surged, the feelings I had suppressed these past days resurfacing. Seeing me staring at him silently, Aubrey's face showed concern. "Has something happened?" Thinking of all he had been through, my eyes suddenly stung with tears. This world is so unfair. Someone as gentle and kind as Aubrey doesn't deserve to be treated so cruelly. Unable to contain my emotions, I met his gaze and reached out to embrace him. Aubrey stood still, not pushing me away, likely assuming I had encountered some misfortune. After a brief hesitation, he gently patted my back, comforting me, "It's all right. I'm here." This man, despite being in darkness himself, never hesitates to offer warmth to others. I hugged him tightly, my voice choked with emotion. "Aubrey, let me stay by your side, please?" Aubrey's hand paused. He understood, but chose to evade, mumbling vaguely, "Haven't you always been here?" "It's different," I said, pulling away slightly to look into his deep dark eyes. My heart burned with unprecedented intensity. "I want you to be completely mine." I should have known I was a greedy person. Aubrey gazed at me intently, his eyes lowered, saying nothing. I entwined my fingers with his, bravely and sincerely telling him, "I want to hold your hand and walk a long, long way with you, as family, as lovers. Not just living under the same roof as landlord and tenant." Aubrey remained silent, his expression calm and unreadable. It was past 10 at night, all around was quiet except for the occasional rustle of wind through the branches. His prolonged silence made my heart tighten with anxiety. I had taken the initiative to cross the line. If he felt nothing, we might never be able to return to how we were before. As my emotions tangled into a messy knot, I heard a soft, self-deprecating chuckle above my head. Aubrey's eyes were cold, the smile not reaching them. "You pity me?" I trembled, realizing he had guessed that I had uncovered his past. "In your eyes, is my sincere affection merely pity for you?" His interpretation was truly painful to hear. Aubrey turned his face away, gazing into the distance. The moonlight cast a faint halo on his face, his expression difficult to decipher. Aubrey had his own abyss, struggling, sinking, tormented, unable to break free. Not wanting to push him, I calmly asked, "Aubrey, do you believe in fate?" Without waiting for his answer, I smiled and said, "I didn't before, but after meeting you, I do." I used to complain about my misfortunes, but it turns out that heaven had reserved the greatest luck for me all along. How fortunate must one be to meet someone like Aubrey Chetwynd? I knew he wanted to push me away, but I was still willing to patiently tell him, "Aubrey, I'm certain, you are my destiny." That evening, Aubrey Chetwynd still didn't answer me, turning away in silence to go home. But I believed he would eventually be mine, patiently and quietly waiting for his response. Life seemed no different, except that Aubrey grew increasingly silent. It would be a lie to say I wasn't concerned, but I didn't interfere. Aubrey, he was battling the demons in his own abyss. Sometimes, the person who pushes you away might be suffering more than you. One midnight, I was awakened by the sound of rain. It's hard to explain why, but upon waking, my heart inexplicably tightened, and I ran downstairs in a panic. In the dim light, Aubrey sat at the piano, just as he had the night I first met him. His fingers rested on the black keys, but no melody emerged. My heart suddenly raced as I quietly walked over and crouched beside him. "Why aren't you sleeping?" I felt guilty, too. If I had known he was in such pain, I wouldn't have brought it up and just let things be. Aubrey lowered his gaze, his eyes first flitting over my bare feet, then slowly returning to my face. I candidly told him I woke up feeling terribly anxious and forgot to put on shoes. After a long silence, Aubrey reached out, hesitating briefly before gently taking my hand. "Dulcie, I'm sorry," he said, head bowed, pressing my hand against his leg, gripping it tightly with both of his. He apologized for denying my feelings with his doubtful and cold attitude that day. I had always known his initial words weren't sincere. How could I blame him? The rain intensified a bit, and his voice mixed with the sound of rainfall, hoarse and muffled. I had planned to leave at midnight on my birthday, having accepted that fate for my life. He turned to me then. "But you came. You barged into my room with all your heart, and I thought, what a brave girl. It wasn't until I saw you looking for me with red eyes in the morning that I realized you had seen through me all along. How could there be such a silly girl, crying over a stranger?" Aubrey's lips twitched in self-mockery. "I didn't even have the courage to live." "That's not true," I said, heartbroken. "You're just ill. The world isn't always kind, not everyone has a good heart, and Aubrey had endured suffering that wasn't meant for him." Aubrey's fingertips gently stroked my palm, his words difficult to express. "I'm glad you came." His voice grew lower, rough and muffled. "In all these years, I've never looked forward to the arrival of tomorrow in the deep of night as much as I have since meeting you." Tears instantly fell from my eyes, and my heart ached terribly. On many lonely nights, he wandered and suffered alone. Each new day wasn't a beacon of hope, but rather a shackle of destruction. For the past few months, Aubrey Chetwynd had spoken only a few words each day. Most of the time, I was the one talking, while he listened quietly. When I got excited and animated, a hint of a smile would touch his eyes. Sometimes when I was upset, he would awkwardly try to comfort me, but when it came to simply being there, he was more patient and quiet than anyone. Aubrey was silent, and opening up about his painful wounds tonight was incredibly difficult for him. The wind and rain howled outside the window as he held my hand and spoke softly. He said, "How can someone like me, who can't even save himself, dare to cling to you as a lifeline?" I nestled my face against his leg, trying to speak but choking up several times. Finally, I said in a husky voice, "Aubrey, don't push me away." I wanted so desperately to express my feelings to him, becoming even more earnest. "You are truly wonderful, and I will never be disappointed in you." I wanted to tell him over and over how lucky I felt to have met him. The rain continued to fall, and the world was both noisy and quiet. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep, and rolled over to find Aubrey. This man was so proper, he wouldn't even sleep in the bed and insisted on using a sleeping bag on the floor. I reached down and gently tugged at his blanket. "Aubrey, I can't sleep." He opened his eyes groggily. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," I said, intentionally trying to tempt him, feigning disappointment. Maybe it's because the one I love is so close, yet I can't touch him. It's unsettling. Aubrey clearly hadn't adjusted to this new relationship, and there was no response for a while. Worried that I might have frightened him, I quickly backtracked. Don't misunderstand, I'm not that kind of girl. I was about to withdraw my hand when he grasped it. I know. In the darkness, his eyes seemed to shine, creating a rippling effect. He soothed me gently. Shall I tell you a story? I perked up at this. Dating him came with bedtime stories, not bad at all. How about you sing a song instead? I pushed my luck, preferring to hear him sing rather than tell a story. Aubrey hesitated, finding it a bit challenging. Would a nursery rhyme do? That would be lovely. I don't know how long he played, though I slept soundly. After a busy day, as night fell, only the last table of customers remained in the restaurant. I had just come out of the kitchen when I heard their loud laughter and gossip. Isn't that the famous pianist? What's his name again? His companion sneered, Aubrey Chetwynd. What pianist? More like a notorious rapist. Ha ha. The men and women at the table burst into raucous laughter. I quickly looked up towards the entrance. In the dim twilight street, neon lights flickered erratically. Aubrey Chetwynd had arrived at some point, standing quietly outside the glass door. The neon glow floated around him as he stood in the light and shadows, looking thin and ethereal. My hand trembled as I held the tea tray, hot tea splashing onto the back of my hand. The burning sensation was nothing compared to the pain in my heart. Their laughter was like knives stabbing my heart and lungs. I felt so awful. How much worse must it be for him? Anger rising, I rushed over to confront them. Aubrey quickly walked over, taking the tray from my hands. Under the mocking gazes of the crowd, he nonchalantly took my sleeve and gently wiped the tea from the back of my hand. He kept his head down, the light casting half his face in shadow, yet still radiating a gentle warmth. As if those hurtful words and the undisguised contempt in their eyes had never reached his ears or eyes. I suddenly felt a lump in my throat, unable to swallow the sadness. Why did you come? Aubrey explained. Bronte delivered vegetables this morning, and I asked her. Seeming to know I didn't want him to come, he apologized softly. I'm sorry. Don't be silly, there's nothing to apologize for. Tears kept falling from my eyes. He was always like this, attentive and wholeheartedly concerned about my feelings. But right now, he was clearly the one hurting the most. Let's go home, he said, holding my hand as we walked past the small restaurants lining the street. On the way back, Aubrey remained silent. I didn't know what to say, starting to speak several times before falling quiet again. In the study, he went straight to the safe and neatly arranged a stack of bank books on the desk. He said to me seriously, "Don't you like buying houses? How about we make that our job from now on?" I couldn't help but be amused by his gesture. My heart warmed, and I reached out to hug him. A phrase had been brewing in my heart, and now overflowing with love, it escaped my lips. Aubrey Chetwynd, I've decided it's you for this lifetime. The days passed quietly and peacefully. He attended to every detail, from meals to daily tasks, always responsive to my needs. As I enthusiastically navigated the property market, happily buying houses and land with a smile on my face, he too gradually became busier. What he was busy with, he didn't say, and I didn't ask. Barnaby Ainsworth often came to pick him up, providing daily transportation. Through this, Barnaby and I also became more familiar with each other. One day, Barnaby had too much to drink. The burly, tattooed man held my hand, crying and sniveling as he spoke of past events. According to him, Aubrey Chetwynd was passionate and loyal in his youth, and had offended someone for Barnaby's sake. The enemy who later destroyed Aubrey's family was, in fact, a foe made because of him. Barnaby could never forgive himself for this. In the end, wiping his tears, he said, "If I could, I'd trade my life to restore everything he's lost." Aubrey, unable to watch any longer, helped Barnaby up and took him home. He then cleaned up the living room, not allowing me to lift a finger. Noticing my constant gaze, Aubrey appeared resigned. The past is irretrievable. We can only move forward. I knew he hadn't truly let go, and he was well aware of his regrets. But I also knew he was making a genuine effort to move on. That was what mattered most. I gripped his hand tightly and nodded with a smile, all right. As the days rolled by, I suddenly saw him on television one day. Only then did I realize he had been working hard to re-enter the public eye, composing new chapters of life at the piano. For years, Aubrey had been almost invisible in private, harboring a deep fear of the outside world. The psychological barriers he must have overcome to step out now, the disdainful looks he must have endured, were unimaginable. He was inherently resilient. After traversing through difficult darkness, he finally stood in the light once more. During a personal interview, the host curiously asked him why he had changed so dramatically. Aubrey slowly folded an origami crane as he spoke, because of my girl. Under the camera's gaze, his long fingers pressed each crease of the origami crane. In the studio lights, his silhouette remained calm and composed. I thought my life would never see light again, and I no longer wished to dwell on the past. But then she came along. Towards the end, his voice took on an indiscernible complexity. I couldn't let her follow me, only to be mocked and looked down upon. He looked up, his words firm and resolute. So, Aubrey Chetwynd must be blameless. Through the television screen, I felt as if he was looking directly at me. In those calm eyes, I glimpsed the fire within his heart, a profound and obscure affection. In this era when the internet was not yet widespread, Aubrey Chetwynd's earnest voice sought to tell everyone that he was innocent. Over the past couple of years, Aubrey had learned quite a few love songs. Just listening to his singing would make one think of the word passionate. At first, Barnaby Ainsworth teased him, "Come on, mate. It's just dating. No need to go overboard." It wasn't long before he ate his own words. He and a girl sang an entire love song together, singing in the rain, repeating it dozens of times until they truly felt the emotion. Their romance blossomed at lightning speed, and within 3 months, news of their wedding spread. I was fortunate enough to attend a wedding straight out of 1995, everything new and exciting. At the wedding, young people pulled the bride and groom to dance amidst the music. Feeling playful, I dragged Aubrey to join the crowd. As we danced with abandon, swaying and bobbing our heads, we were having the time of our lives. Aubrey indulged my wild side, but, not wanting to leave me alone in the crowd, he had no choice but to dance along with me. At this moment, he was radiant, shining brightly among the people. My heart swelled with warmth, and I mischievously jumped onto him, clinging and refusing to move. "I'm tired. Carry me while you dance," I said. Afraid I might fall, Aubrey held me tight and whispered in my ear, "They're filming, aren't you embarrassed?" I couldn't care less about the camera, happily nestling on his shoulder. "That's perfect. When I miss you later, I can watch the video." Aubrey fell silent, taking my words to heart. As the music ebbed and flowed, his lips grazed my ear, making a heartfelt promise. "Dulcie, I will stay by your side for the rest of my life." The implication was clear: you can see me every day, no need for videos to remember me by. Hearing him speak words of love was indeed gratifying. Though my heart rejoiced, I still played coy. Men's words are as unreliable as ghosts. "Who would believe you?" Aubrey grew nervous, gripping my gaze tightly. "You don't believe me?" Oh, this man was far too serious, lacking a bit of romance. I deliberately tried to entice him. "Show me something, and then I'll believe you." In truth, I harbored some unfulfilled expectations. Having received his wholehearted affection, I wanted even more. Aubrey pondered for a moment, then asked uncertainly, "Like what?" Seeing his bewildered expression, my smile grew more mischievous. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pressing close to his ear. "I have an immature suggestion." "Oh." He stopped amidst the crowd, casting a slender shadow. "Add me to your household registry." To hide my bashfulness, I sighed dramatically, just thinking about all the houses and land you've bought. And how I won't benefit when they appreciate in value, makes me so sad. Aubrey was clearly caught off guard by this, staring at me blankly. Feeling uncomfortable under his gaze, I worried he might not understand my subtle hint, or worse, refuse. Anxiously, I asked, "You don't want to?" Aubrey snapped back to reality, quickly shaking his head and pulling me closer. As the music drew to a close, the newlyweds embraced and kissed, surrounded by the crowd. I heard Aubrey whisper in my ear, "All right." After a pause, he added solemnly, "It's all yours." Getting added to Aubrey Chetwynd's council tax bill wasn't an easy task. After much back and forth, I finally got my own ID card. The day we left the local authority office, I had a new identity, Aubrey Chetwynd's wife. Holding our council tax bill and marriage certificate, happiness slowly brewed in my heart, filling it completely. I grinned stupidly at the photo for a while. Aubrey leaned in and suddenly said gloomily, "I feel like I look a bit daft in this photo." He rarely looks at it, but now that he has, I couldn't help but laugh, indeed. Aubrey sighed, quite melancholy. It's hard to imagine this man would care about such a thing. I remembered that when we were taking our wedding photos, he was actually quite nervous. I secretly reached for his hand, it was ice cold. This usually composed man couldn't hide his nerves when it came to marriage. I kept smiling and whispered to him without moving my lips, "Darling, smile, or people will think I forced you into this." Aubrey was startled by the word darling, his expression softened and his mouth opened slightly as if to say something, but no sound came out. The photo captured that moment, with Aubrey looking like a bewildered child facing the camera. I was quite pleased. Aubrey didn't seem to mind so much now. Instead, he leaned down and asked softly, "What did you call me just now?" Although his tone was as usual, I could sense a hint of mischief in him. Wanting to hear those two words again, eh? Thinking this, I chuckled and patted his shoulder, "Carry me home, and I'll tell you." Aubrey obediently bent down. It was clear he quite liked that term of endearment. I'm a bit naughty, so once on his back, I started teasing him in various ways. I made him jog quickly, tiring him out thoroughly before I was satisfied enough to softly call him by that name in his ear. Aubrey beamed, breathing unevenly, muttering under his breath, "I have a wife, I have a home now." Home had always been a heavy topic for Aubrey. For years after losing his family, he was alone, without a home, without family. Looking at such a life, all he could see was an abyss. Ignoring his efforts to hide his choked-up voice, I hugged him tightly against his back. "Aubrey, we not only have a home, but we'll also have our children. In our blueprint for the future, there's him, me, and our children. We'll grow old together, with grandchildren around our knees, a lifetime of happiness." Unfortunately, my time is up. So is Aubrey's. Aubrey Chetwynd is the perfect lover. In matters of love, he has mastered the art of attentiveness from the very beginning, honing his skills to perfection over time. I often boast, indirectly praising him, I have such good taste. Aubrey always responds humbly, "Indeed, I'm so lucky you chose me." I've said some silly things to him, of course, "I knew from the moment I first saw you that you were meant to be mine." Aubrey teases back, "My, aren't you confident?" That's brilliant. My grandmother used to say that people are always drawn to what they see at first glance because it's a recognition of the other person's soul. I think she was right. Yes, the moment I saw Aubrey, I had a strong feeling that he was meant to be mine. Aubrey chuckles and gives me a playful glare, "Am I just a thing to you?" I cup his face in my hands and plant a firm kiss on him, solemnly declaring, "You're my husband." This never fails to work its charm. Aubrey is utterly pleased, willingly allowing me to cuddle and fuss over him. These blissful days are joyfully leading us towards our 1997. 1997 was our year. That autumn, I was surprised to discover my body was nurturing a new life. After the initial joy, Aubrey Chetwynd became more worried. I understood, he was concerned for me. In his view, childbirth was something where a man, no matter how much he empathized, couldn't share even a fraction of the pain. So, before the topic of children occasionally came up, Aubrey had seriously said, "It doesn't matter if we have a child or not. We don't have to." But how could I agree? In those days surrounded by happiness, I sometimes thought about that missing person poster. I was so certain that I could never leave him. Yet I feared that fate might be unavoidable. If such misfortune were to occur and I really had to go, someone needed to stay by his side. Moreover, this man deserved for me to bear his child. With this hasty logic, I cherished this new life extraordinarily. Aubrey almost paused his work, focusing on taking care of me. Under his attentive care, I gradually became rounder. I complained teasingly that we should quickly take some nice photos before I became too plump and unattractive. Aubrey deliberately took out the camera he had played with as a youth. I was dissatisfied with my complexion, insisting he take a series of black and white photos of me. When I received the photos, I was delighted. He truly had some photographic skills. In each picture, I saw versions of myself I had never seen before. But as I looked at them, I furrowed my brow. This set of photos seemed familiar. I soon remembered, yes, I had seen them before, on that missing person poster years ago. So, this photo was taken by Aubrey for me. I carefully examined the photos in my hand, thinking chaotically about a notion: there is destiny in the grand scheme of things. The emergence of this thought made me anxious. I instinctively looked at Aubrey. The golden autumn sunlight quietly spread across the windowsill. He lowered his head to look at the photos, the corners of his lips slightly upturned, his eyes full of cherished affection. A shadow fell over my heart, lingering for a long time. It was hard to imagine how I would cope if I lost him. I didn't dare to think about how Aubrey would manage if I left. These past few years, we had worked hard to integrate into each other's lives, loving each other and dreaming of the future every minute and second. Separation would be such a cruel thing for us. Aubrey sensed my unease and asked curiously, "Don't you like them?" Not wanting to add to his worries, I quickly brightened my mood and randomly found a topic. "No, I was just wondering, do you prefer a boy or a girl?" This question was quite fitting, and Aubrey didn't think otherwise. Without any hesitation, he answered, "A girl." "Why?" "Like you. Being cherished has always been the most healing thing." I tried my best to dispel my unease, carefully nurturing the child that was soon to arrive. The end of winter was approaching, yet the snow showed no signs of stopping. One morning, I had a sudden whim to build a snowman. Aubrey Chetwynd couldn't resist my plea, so he bundled me up warmly and led me to the garden to make our snowy creation. Unfortunately, as soon as we stepped outside, we were startled by a huddled figure under the porch eaves. Aubrey protectively shielded me behind him. Upon closer inspection, we saw it was a young lad wrapped in tattered clothes. He was thin, with a gaunt face, shivering uncontrollably in the bitter cold. He must have been a vagrant from afar, seeking shelter from the falling snow under our eaves. When he saw us, he lifted his head in alarm. Though his face was blue with cold, his eyes were clear. He looked at us pitifully, like a frightened lamb. I was unexpectedly reminded of my own sorry state when I first arrived. If I hadn't met Aubrey, I might have been even worse off than this boy. Feeling compassion, I tugged at Aubrey's sleeve. "His clothes won't last him through this winter." Aubrey hesitated briefly. He likely wanted to give the lad some money and send him on his way, but seeing I had no intention of leaving him, Aubrey's heart softened. After carefully inquiring about the boy's background, we settled him in the empty cottage at the back of the property. That winter, we gained a young boy in our household. The lad had a lovely name, Wilfred Fairfax. He was shy but remarkably sensible and hardworking, always eager to help with chores and never shying away from difficult tasks. With Wilfred's arrival, Aubrey seemed to become more at ease. While he adamantly refused to let Wilfred help with cooking, he allowed the boy to assist with other tasks. Wilfred's presence truly brought joy to our home. Every clear morning after sweeping the snow, he would build a beautiful snowman in the garden, adorning it with a red scarf that fluttered freely in the wind. As I gazed out the window, catching glimpses of this scene, my heart would fill with delight. Truth be told, I had ulterior motives for keeping Wilfred that I hadn't shared with Aubrey. Wilfred was an orphan with a gentle nature. If he stayed with Aubrey and was treated well, he would surely remember the kindness and remain by Aubrey's side in the future. I constantly worried about what would happen if I were to leave, fearing Aubrey would be left alone. I dreaded the thought of him wandering this house like a lonely ghost, as he had in the past. As winter began to fade, spring winds whispered beneath the melting snow. Without warning, one morning I was struck by excruciating abdominal pain. I curled up, clutching my stomach in agony. Aubrey was terrified. It was the first time I'd seen him so agitated. He shouted at the equally frightened Wilfred, "Go start the car." He'd forgotten that 15-year-old Wilfred couldn't drive. Wilfred, regaining his senses, rushed to call an ambulance. Aubrey couldn't wait. He scooped me up and dashed out of the house. That day brought the last snowfall of winter. Just yesterday, I had checked the weather forecast and told Aubrey, spring is finally coming. When it gets a bit warmer, we'll go for a picnic in the countryside. We had planned to enjoy the spring air, but in the spring of 1998, I would never again feel the gentle breeze. The new life that Aubrey and I had longed for was abruptly taken from us this spring. Despite our utmost care and precautions, our child would not be joining us. The doctors couldn't provide a clear explanation, only saying that the baby's heartbeat had stopped and nothing could be done. Throughout that difficult spring, I was in a constant daze, unable to take in any of Aubrey's consoling words. It's only now that I've come to accept fate's design. I never truly belonged here, so how could the new life I brought have stayed? And if that's the case, surely I too am destined to leave, aren't I? I spent my days in a daze, barely conscious until I suddenly realized I was in Aubrey's arms. The lamplight was dim and hazy. It was then that I noticed how much more haggard he had become over these past few days. He had lost weight, looking pitifully thin. I remembered the day at the hospital when I was about to be wheeled into the operating theater. Aubrey had gripped my hand tightly, his eyes rimmed with red. His voice trembled terribly as he tried to comfort me. There, don't be afraid. I'm here. He couldn't come in with me. In the last second before the theater doors closed, I saw him clearly through my hazy vision. He was crying. All this time, I only knew my own unbearable pain, but I had overlooked how every time I was in tears with a broken heart, his eyes would redden too. This wonderful man had been worn down and mistreated by me into such a state. How long has it been since you've shaved? I reached out to touch his face, my heart aching unbearably. As soon as I spoke, tears began to fall. Seeing me cry again, he forgot about himself and hurriedly tried to wipe away my tears, staining his sleeve. Are you uncomfortable anywhere? He asked anxiously. Over these past few months, the physical wounds had long been carefully nursed back to health by him. There was nothing wrong with me. I was just heartbroken to see him cry. I'm far from a good wife, truly spoiled by his love. I rarely remember things for him, instead always relying on him to worry and care about everything. Caressing his face, feeling the sharp bones beneath, I choked out, "You fool, have you not been eating properly?" During this time, I couldn't remember if he had eaten a proper meal, or if he had slept well even once. It was as if I had woken from a fog, my heart aching terribly. Aubrey didn't answer, instead asking, "Are you hungry?" I laughed through my tears. You idiot. He really was foolish, always thinking of me. He should take some time to look after himself too. I could only try to coax him. Aubrey, I'm hungry. Yes, only this way would he sit down and have a proper meal with me. The chill in the air gradually dissipated as summer arrived right on schedule. I remembered our promise to go for a picnic in spring, which we had ultimately broken. In the future, let's not miss out again. On an early summer night, a gentle breeze rustled the curtains. I hugged him and pleaded, "From now on, will you take me with you wherever you go?" I wanted to be with him, counting down every minute and second. Holding his hand, embracing, kissing, expressing our love fully every night before sleep and every morning after waking. Aubrey replied hoarsely, "All right, whatever you wish." From that day on, I became Aubrey Chetwynd's little shadow. When he performed at concerts, I sat in the audience, unable to stop standing during thunderous applause, boasting to those nearby, "Look, that's my husband." Childish, perhaps, but I never tired of it. As soon as Aubrey left the stage, he returned to my side without delay, either accompanying me to enjoy the rest of the performance or taking my hand as we headed home. As time passed, many in the music circle came to know that the renowned pianist Aubrey Chetwynd had a very clingy wife who never left his side. Anyone who tried to invite Aubrey out for a meal was met with the same response: he had to go home to his wife. Even Barnaby Ainsworth couldn't stand it, teasing Aubrey for being henpecked. Aubrey, ever sharp-tongued, would quip lightly, "Oh, no scratch marks on your neck today? You're improving." Barnaby would always complain that life was unfair, that everyone picked on him. All their friends knew that despite Barnaby's outward bravado with his mates, he was bound to get a thrashing at home. His feisty wife had quite the temper, scratching and clawing when riled up. Yet despite their squabbles over the years, they'd never parted ways. If anyone was truly henpecked, it was Barnaby, hands down. I often envied their relationship. Such a life full of domestic passion, who could say it wasn't happiness? I tried earnestly to tell Aubrey about my origins, but unsurprisingly, he didn't believe me. Mimicking my words from our first meeting, he teased affectionately, "Yes, I know you're my Dulcie who fell from heaven." To convince him, I turned the house upside down looking for that old newspaper I'd brought with me, but it was nowhere to be found. Perhaps I was worrying needlessly. Maybe heaven had taken pity on this mortal's suffering and allowed me to stay by his side. Still, on nights of passionate embraces, I'd whisper other reminders as if they were sweet nothings. Aubrey, if one day I disappear, you must believe that we'll meet again. In the 5th year of my relationship with Aubrey Chetwynd, our love was both intense and serene. Time passed quietly, and on Christmas Eve this year, we had an unexpected visitor. A tall, beautiful, and fashionable woman stood at our doorstep with luggage from overseas, smiling as she affectionately called Aubrey Obs. She was polite and courteous to me, but I couldn't help feeling that her gaze held a complexity that was difficult to describe. Aubrey was equally polite to her, maintaining a cool and distant demeanor. Women's intuition is innate, and I found myself overthinking. By the time we sat down for Christmas dinner, I had lost my appetite. To make matters worse, after dinner she tactfully expressed her wish to stay the night. Aubrey coldly refused, "It's not convenient." He then asked Wilfred to help her leave and find a hotel nearby. As she was leaving, the woman playfully complained, "Obs, that's not fair. Just because you have a wife now, you're forgetting your old friends." I heard this as a jab at me and mentally added it to Aubrey's tab. Once she left, I gave him a cool glance but said nothing. Aubrey didn't bother to placate me, instead lazily teasing, "Jealous?" "Ha, you wish," I retorted. Unfazed, he pulled me onto his lap. "Silly girl, why get upset over a stranger? Oh, please. Didn't you hear her passive-aggressive comments towards me?" When it came to matters involving Aubrey, I'd always been possessive. She was out of line. "She won't be coming back." With a forced smile, I asked, "She's the one who used to call you every day, isn't she?" Before this, our home phone would ring at the same time each day. Aubrey would answer, exchange a few brief words, and that was it. This routine had persisted for some time. I had never asked about the caller's identity, and Aubrey had never mentioned it. Until one day, he said to the person on the other end, "Don't call back anymore." The caller asked something, and Aubrey, looking at me sitting on the sofa, replied, "My wife finds it disruptive." After that, the calls stopped. I had guessed it was a woman, someone who cared for him. So when I finally met her, I couldn't help but feel sensitive about it. Hearing my question, Aubrey smiled and explained. She probably feared I'd died, so I invited her for Christmas dinner to thank her for her concern. He took the opportunity to satisfy my curiosity, sharing a rare story from his youth. He and Barnaby Ainsworth's group had grown up together, and Elsie Quillen was among them, sharing youthful friendships. Later, when Aubrey got into trouble, the Quillen family sent Elsie abroad to study, distancing themselves from the situation. Since then, apart from the daily phone calls, they hadn't seen each other. Nestled in his arms, listening to his brief explanation, I teased, "Really? Aren't you leaving something out?" Aubrey looked down at me, puzzled. "What? You said the Quillens were avoiding trouble. If there was nothing between you and her, what were they avoiding?" Aubrey chuckled, "We were just kids. I wasn't so beastly as to have those kinds of thoughts about her." "Truly nothing?" Aubrey replied seriously, "Never." At this point, I had no reason to continue pressing the issue. Instead, my hands began to wander, slipping under his shirt as I playfully said, "Then I'll have to inspect the goods myself." Aubrey raised an eyebrow, a mischievous smile curving his lips. "By all means, inspect away." Later, Barnaby brought his friends to our house. She appeared, poised and graceful in front of everyone, with no one able to detect her feelings for Aubrey. However, after dinner, the men went to play darts, and Aubrey was dragged along. Only Elsie and I were left in the living room. Suddenly, she asked with a meaningful look, "I've always wondered, why you?" Adhering to the etiquette of hospitality, I smiled and replied, "If you want to know, why ask me?" Elsie was stunned into silence. As women, how could I not know that Elsie had feelings for Aubrey? Otherwise, she wouldn't have held on to them for so many years. But she lacked the courage to stand with him against the darkness. She was fond of the Aubrey who was glorified and dazzling. So when Aubrey fell from grace, she retreated. From then on, there would never be a place for her by Aubrey's side. I missed the radiant Aubrey but met him when he was engulfed in darkness. But what of it? He was still the love of my heart. What I wanted was him as a person. Elsie remained silent for a long while, saying nothing as she prepared to leave. I escorted her to the door, suddenly struck by a thought. "Miss Quillen," I called out to her, "perhaps you still have a chance." My feelings towards Elsie were complex. I didn't like her, but judging from her daily phone calls in the past, she did care for Aubrey. Elsie frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" I shrugged and smiled, "Nothing, I just wanted to tell you, if I'm not around in the future, please make sure to visit him often." Before she could inquire further, I bid her farewell. "Take care, Miss Quillen." The men finished their game close to midnight. When Aubrey slipped into bed, I was half asleep. He gently moved closer, his face nuzzling my hair as he softly said, "Good night." I snuggled into his embrace, murmuring drowsily, "Darling, I'm cold." In the next moment, he pulled me into his arms. I silently curved my lips into a smile, falling asleep contentedly in his embrace. In early March, Aubrey returned from an outing feeling drowsy and went to bed early. When I approached him later, reaching out to embrace him as usual, I realized he was burning with fever. Before I could anxiously scold him, Aubrey preempted me, "Just a small cold, nothing to worry about." Sometimes, Aubrey could be even more coquettish than me. Half closing his eyes with a mischievous smile, he said, "If you sleep with me for a while, I'm sure I'll get better very quickly." I wanted to be angry, but looking into his bleary eyes, my heart instantly softened. "I'll go buy you some medicine," I said. Aubrey held on to me, "No need, just let me hold you." Usually, I was the one clinging to him, hanging onto his body. Today was unusual, he was suddenly so clingy, and I found it quite novel. "Wait for me, I'll be back soon," I said, still intent on getting him medicine, coaxing him gently, "I'll hold you when I return." Aubrey resigned, "Then I'll wait for you." In my haste to leave, I hurried down the street. The spring chill hadn't fully dissipated, and the cool air seeped into my skin. I rushed to find the medicine at the chemist's, but before I could, a sudden wave of dizziness overcame me, and I collapsed straight to the ground. Before losing consciousness, a terrifying thought flashed through my mind. I would never return to Aubrey's side again. When I opened my eyes again, the smell of disinfectant instantly awakened me, and I sat up abruptly. "Dulcie, you're finally awake." A familiar yet strange female voice, choked with tears, sounded beside me. I turned stiffly to see Verity. She was no longer the young and vibrant woman of years past, her face was haggard, as if she had aged over a decade. "Where have you been these 6 years?" she cried, throwing herself at me as I burst into tears. "I went mad looking for you." I stared at her blankly, my mind completely empty. Her tears soaked my shoulder, the dampness causing my body to shudder violently. A chill spread from the core of my heart, as if I were trapped in an icy cavern, my entire body frozen stiff. No miracle occurred. On this sparse, ordinary afternoon, I left my love behind. My chest ached with grief, and I bent over in pain. Verity quickly let go of me, anxiously asking, "Where does it hurt?" "I'll call a doctor right away." She turned to run towards the door, but I held her back. I wanted to say something, but tears kept falling uncontrollably. "What's wrong? Don't scare me like this." Seeing me cry, she began to sob even harder. Tears streaming down my face, it took me a while to speak. "May I borrow your mobile to make a call?" Perhaps my tone was too polite, as she hesitated for a moment before handing me her phone. I remembered clearly the phone number from the missing person poster. It was still the old home number. After all these years, Aubrey had never changed it. I dialed the number etched in my heart, and as the ringing tone reached my ears, my heart began to race. Someone quickly answered. Tears cascading down my cheeks, I whispered, "Aubrey." There was a moment of silence on the other end, then a hoarse, sorrowful voice replied, "Madam, the master was right. You really did come back." "Wilfred?" I instinctively called out his name. He immediately broke down crying, "Madam, it's me." "Where's the master?" Wilfred, now older, his voice weathered by time, said, "The master passed away in the early hours of the morning after receiving your call 6 years ago." He finished speaking through sobs. The phone fell, and he might have said something else, but I couldn't make it out. Something exploded in my chest, leaving me raw and bleeding inside. 6 years ago, that was when I first discovered the missing person poster and called him. I hadn't said a single kind word, just angrily berated him before hanging up. Love, it was the last time I would ever see him. For me, it had been less than half a day since I left him, but for him, it had been over 20 years, from 1999 to 2022. How had he managed to go on? The mere thought shattered my heart. In broad daylight, with sunlight streaming through the window, my world collapsed in an instant, and darkness descended. Though my heart ached as if I were dying, I couldn't make a sound. Only tears kept falling endlessly. Verity didn't know what had happened to me and didn't dare disturb me. She simply kept watch by my bedside day and night. After days of heart-wrenching grief, I gradually began to calm down. Having spent so much time with Aubrey, I had absorbed some of his essence. In the darkness, I began to heal myself, fumbling forward. Verity, I'd like to change my clothes. A tweed suit, I mumbled, looking at the tray. I want to go home. I wanted to go home, to see him. The rain was pouring down heavily as the car pulled up to the curb. I remembered that quiet oak-lined street, still flanked by lush green trees. It was here that I once met the love of my life and experienced the most brilliant romance. Returning now, I found only desolation. I stood at the gate for a long while, raindrops drumming on my black umbrella, blurring my vision. A man hurried out from inside. Wilfred Fairfax, now in his 40s, very thin, his hair grayed considerably. He gazed at me through the wrought iron gate, his eyes quickly reddening. Lowering his head to open the gate, he muttered, "Mrs. Chetwynd, you look just the same as when you left." His eyes were red, but I smiled. "Yes, but you've aged." That 15-year-old boy, Aubrey, had grown up and was now beginning to age too. My Aubrey must have been old when he passed. Thinking this, I found some small comfort. I stood under the corridor eaves, closing my umbrella, and pointed with a smile. "You were sitting right there back then. I saw you, so small, shivering. I thought you looked terribly cold." Wilfred bowed his head respectfully as he listened. "Now, you've aged just like this house." Wilfred smiled too, "Only you remain as young as ever." Feeling apprehensive as I neared home, I surprisingly lacked the courage to enter once at the door. Silently watching the curtain of rain, I softly asked after a while, "Is he still alone?" The answer was clear in my heart, but I couldn't help asking. Wilfred's gaze was quick, glancing at my eyes before immediately lowering his head. "Mrs. Chetwynd, the master has been waiting for you all this time." As the bitterness welled up inside me, I giggled lightly. "Miss Quillen is so hopeless." As I laughed, it became unbearable. People are so contradictory. On one hand, hoping that after I left, there would be someone by his side who truly cared for him. Yet secretly wishing that in the end, he would belong only to me. No matter which wish came true, it was equally painful. Wilfred was perceptive, knowing what I wanted to hear, and spoke up. "The master has fared well these years. He arranged everything early on. That last night, he shut himself in the study and passed very peacefully." I lowered my head, looking at the dripping umbrella. He didn't want to wait for me? If he had waited just 6 more years, we could have met again. But he didn't wait. He must have been tired. The master said. Wilfred hesitated, then continued reluctantly, "He had aged into someone you wouldn't recognize, better to meet again in 1993. I fell silent. "Mrs. Chetwynd, please come in. The master left something for you in the study." Dulcie took down a wooden box from the bookshelf and opened it, revealing a collection of gleaming gold necklaces. During those years, Aubrey was always tinkering with gold, melting down pieces to recreate new ones. I was obsessed with buying property and had little interest in gold, so I hadn't paid much attention to what he had actually made. Upon closer inspection, I saw hair clips, earrings, bangles, and other jewelry, all exquisitely crafted and engraved with my name and the date he made them. In the past, I might have teased him for having too much time on his hands. Now, looking at them made my eyes sting. Wilfred said, "Mr. Chetwynd treasured these items. He once told me very seriously that since you have no family, these were the dowry he made for you with his own hands." "Silly man," I said, mocking his foolishness, but tears fell from my eyes. During those years, Aubrey had mentioned a wedding ceremony, but I couldn't be bothered to organize one. Besides, neither of us had much family, so we simply didn't bother. He had actually prepared such an extensive dowry for me in secret. I'll contact the solicitor. The master transferred all his assets to you. He said these might all be from your wise investments back then. I flipped through the envelopes in the box without speaking. For words were written on them, to my wife, Dulcie. Before I could even open them, my tears had already smudged the envelopes. Wilfred hushed and left the room. Rain pattered against the window panes, a cacophony of sounds. I sat motionless for a long while before daring to open the letter. The letter was neither long nor short, and reading it felt quite mundane, mostly filled with reminders. My dear wife Dulcie, I hope this letter finds you well. Last night, when I received your call, I was overjoyed beyond words, choking up before I could even speak. Several times I wanted to tell you how much I missed you, but the words caught in my throat. At this moment, the Dulcie of the past hasn't yet met me. If I were to blurt out those words now, it might seem rather forward. It's all right, I know you'll soon be going back to 1993, back to my side. We still have 6 years together, a brief time to love, but a lifetime of memories. When you return from 1999, I will no longer be in this world. Don't force yourself, and don't dwell on it. I was supposed to leave in 1993, but you came, and my barren life began to grow towards the sun. Until now, it has been fulfilling. There's only one small regret, that I couldn't see you one last time 20 years later. How I wish I could hold your hand and tell you about the days after you left. On a spring afternoon in 1999, you didn't return as expected, and I couldn't embrace you one last time. I searched for you for so long, until I finally accepted that you had truly returned to your future world. At first, the pain was unbearable, but gradually I found peace, walking a long, long path alone. Springs came and winters passed. The sapling you planted in the garden has grown into a towering oak, and last year I decorated the bedroom with the tweed suits you used to wear. I once promised to wait for you for a lifetime. Dulcie, my love, I have not broken that promise. One day, I went to see a play. The actress on stage sang a mournful song, I was born before you, and you were born when I was old. How I regret we were not born at the same time, to spend every day in love with you. I realized I had developed some of the same melancholy. After the performance, I couldn't shake off the feeling, and my sorrow turned into motivation. Now I am old and frail, while you are in the prime of your life. Our past cannot be continued, and I don't want to burden you with worry. If I make you cry, it pains me even more. Dulcie, I have kept my promise and waited for you all my life. Would you grant me one wish in return? I have no other desires in this life, only this final request. I wish for my beloved wife, whom I cherish more than life itself, to find happiness until her hair turns white, just as I have. And no cheating, you promised a lifetime, not a day less. Dulcie, my love, I must go now. The years ahead are long, and the path may be rough. Without me by your side, please take care of yourself. In our next life, please make sure to return to me sooner.